Sunday Baroque Conversations is made possible by the Friends of Sunday Baroque and is produced at WSHU Public Radio in Fairfield, Connecticut. I'm Suzanne Bona. Thank you for listening. Don't miss an episode of Sunday Baroque Conversations. Subscribe on Apple, Google, or wherever you get your podcasts. And please leave us a review. If you want to find out where you can listen to our weekly show, visit our website, sundaybaroque.org, for a station list and our 24/7 stream. Again, that's sundaybaroque.org. Violinist Kelly Hall-Tompkins is a soloist and chamber musician with an international career. The Naumburg International Violin Competition Honorarium Prize winner and Sphinx Medal of Excellence recipient earned her Bachelor of Music with honors in violin performance, with a minor in French, from Eastman School of Music, and she received her master's and an honorary doctorate from Manhattan School of Music. Kelly Hall-Tompkins is also the founder and executive and artistic director of Music Kitchen, whose mission is to bring top, emerging, and established professional musicians together to share the inspirational, therapeutic, and uplifting power of music with New York City's disenfranchised homeless shelter population. Kelly Hall-Tompkins joins me on Zoom to talk about her career as a performer, innovator, humanitarian, and social justice advocate. Welcome.
Thank you so much. Great to be here, Suzanne.
Well, what a pleasure to speak with you. So let's go back to the beginning, please, if you don't mind. How did you get your start in music? Were you from a musical family, and was violin your first instrument?
No, I'm not from a musical family. I actually chose it on my own, kind of out of the blue. I was exposed to classical music through Warner Brothers cartoons and the Lutheran Church, of which I was, which I grew up in. Uh-huh. And it's largely Baroque music in tying in with your show. Uh-huh. And after, I think, quite a few years of that, my elementary school took us to see the local orchestra, the Greenville Symphony in South Carolina. And then following that, a string quartet came to my elementary school. And at that point, I was hooked. And I just said, that's what I want to do.
Wow.
And I knew it instantly.
Really? And
yes.
So was this, since you didn't come from a musical family, was there any sales pitch that had to happen to try to get started on violin?
I don't think so. No, my mom is all about excellence, and whatever it is, you're going to do it to the nth degree. And I think at the time I was actually a gymnast. I started gymnastics before the violin. I started gymnastics at 5. I started violin at 9. I think they overlapped for about 1 year. And I was really good at gymnastics, and I thought it was something that I might want to get serious about, but the violin kind of overtook that very quickly.
Wow.
And, my mom helped me run with it.
Wow. Well, that was sort of related to my next question. How and when did you realize that music really is your calling? It's what you're meant to do.
From day one. When I was 9 years old, I knew it instantly.
Really?
I wanted nothing more than to be able to play the music the way I wanted to hear it. And that's still the carrot that draws me to this day.
Wow. So you were that kid that mom did not have to nag to practice.
Well, I didn't understand, since I kind of picked up the skills of violin preparation and study along the way. I didn't really understand what it meant to practice in those early years. Mm-hmm. I played for the love of playing. And I did that frequently, but it wasn't terribly regimented. It wasn't terribly structured in those early days until I learned how to structure practice.
Sure.
So I think it was a process. And I guess there's there's a whole learning philosophy that's built on that, isn't it? The Montessori schools, when you're ready for something or when you ask for something, then that's the appropriate time. It took me years to really to accept that kind of background. I often would muse on what if I'd started earlier, what if I'd had it more structured. But I think I was and continue to be drawn by passion.
So as a performer, you really span musical genres. I mean, you have of course, the core classical violin repertory, but you also have a lot of contemporary music composed just for you. You also have an ongoing collaboration with the composer and fiddler, Mark O'Connor. And then you even did a 13-month engagement on Broadway for the production of Fiddler on the Roof. So that's quite a broad span. So do you have musical genres that sort of move you most as a performer, maybe favorite composers or compositions or performing experiences that are really kind of the things that you keep coming back to?
I am a classical music nerd who loves the entire span of the 1,200 years of classical music history and the entire 400 years of instrumental music history that we get as violinists. And I discovered myself within that diverse array of musical styles, influences, and periods. I discovered myself as someone who also likes to push the envelope into the 20th century and with other genres. So yes, I worked with Mark O'Connor for 5 years and played music that was influenced by, he is a traditional fiddler, but he writes contemporary classical music that is influenced by bluegrass, influenced by old time. And and influenced by jazz. And I thoroughly enjoyed that time playing that music. And I found myself, doing my own explorations with my imagination project, recording the Isai Solo Sonata number 6, and then combining that with my jazz inflected arrangement of Pure Imagination. And then, yes, I spent 18 blissful months on Broadway, 13 of those playing as the fiddler, the actual violin soloist of Fiddler on the Roof. And I can say it was one of the greatest personal and professional experiences of my life.
Oh, that's cool. What was it like? Give us a little peek behind the scenes.
Well, it was, I think I'm one of those rare people who I think was not Tevye in high school. I think it seems like everybody else was. So I discovered Fiddler as an adult, more or less. I was the concertmaster of my youth orchestra in South Carolina. And I do remember playing a medley of Fiddler on the Roof, ironically, that of course started out with that iconic violin solo. Dum, ba, dum, bum, bum, bum. But I really discovered it in preparation for the role on Broadway. My mom and I watched the 1971 film, the music the arrangements by John Williams, the violin soloist Isaac Stern, and of course Tevye, played by Chaim Topol, who recently passed away within this last year. And I was so blown away by the story, by the power of it, by the music, by the tradition, pun intended and not intended, that I couldn't really wait. I couldn't wait to jump into this. And I thought, how can you possibly, what more is there to say about this than what was said in that incredibly wonderful film? Right. And then I met Danny Burstein and I met Bart Shear, our director, and all of the wonderful, Jessica Hecht, all the wonderful actors and dancers and choreographers. And that film was, there was, completely different arrangement of the music by John Williams that featured Isaac Stern. In our production, our creative team, Oran Eldor and Ted Sperling, wrote solos for me that didn't previously exist in the Broadway score. And so it gave me this clay to mold every night. And I was so inspired by the acting and dancing on stage that I got to play interactively with those powerful moments. I started the show alone in the theater, and there were other moments in the middle when Tevye tells Golda rather that Chava is dead to us. I had another solo that was alone in the theater, and I ended the show alone in the theater essentially, and with many solos in between. So I had this incredible soloist's laboratory to explore my own creativity and to explore my ability to collaborate and draw from my imagination off of the acting, the terrific acting of our cast. So it was to this day, I guess it's the music that I have performed most in my life, because we performed nearly 500 shows.
Wow.
And I was absolutely there for every one of them. I was so excited to go to Anatevka every evening. And when the light went off, I started my solo, and it was just really an incredible experience.
Wow. I can feel the electricity and just see the look on your face. It's great. So how is playing something like that different from playing, as the soloist on a stage with an orchestra behind you? And how is that compared also to, for example, playing chamber music?
Well, the ironic thing about Fiddler was that I was not seen in the production.
Mm-hmm.
It's the first time in Fiddler on the Roof Broadway history that the role of fiddler was kind of bifurcated between two people,
mm-hmm.
one who was producing the sound and a dancer who they actually flew 72 feet above the stage. So it is ironic that I had such a soloistic role where I wasn't seen initially until all of the press started coming out. And then I think the press was really drawn to my performance and started interviewing me, and thereby I became seen. So in that respect, I was playing with orchestra as soloist, but was not initially seen in that role. And so playing, it was like playing a concerto every evening, really, for eight times a week. And it was very, very special
mm-hmm.
to be able to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, it's also like chamber music, because I felt like I was in the way, well, any musical genre really should be very collaborative and interactive with all of the parts involved, especially concerto, not just chamber music, but in the sense that I had the opportunity to play these very intimate, powerful, and dramatic expressions of music interactively or opposite the vocally spoken, the acting involved. It was very, very powerful in a way that chamber music also, reaches me deeply, touches me deeply.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that's a good jumping off point to talk about Music Kitchen, about mm-hmm. things that touch you deeply. And I'd like to know, how did you start it? Why did you start it? And what is it about?
Music Kitchen, Food for the Soul, is an organization that I founded as the pioneer organization to bring classical music to those experiencing homelessness. Mm-hmm. We're in our 18th year. I founded it in 2005. Mm-hmm. And I founded it, I kind of stumbled into it because of what was happening in my life at the time. I was preparing for a concerto with orchestra, and a dear friend who happened to be the pastor of my church was dying. Mm. And I was so consumed with that experience and what was happening with him that I didn't have the presence of mind to coordinate with my friends and colleagues like I normally would do to play practice run-throughs of my repertoire. And so as the date of my travel departure was approaching, and I hadn't made any plans to do this, I was getting concerned, and I was thinking, who can I play for? And since I was a volunteer cook at the church shelter, I decided in a pinch to play for the shelter, but I felt terribly guilty about it, because I thought, who but professional musicians could stand to hear a violin concerto without accompaniment? So I thought it was one of many preconceived notions that would eventually fall away when I realized how true the power of music is, and what even the small things like that we might take for granted that would be so deeply affecting to those who don't have access to it. Yeah. So that experience, we were so bonded that evening talking about the music. And as it turned out, they had known the pastor as well, who at that point had passed away. And they were moved and wanted to know if I was playing for the funeral. And I said I was. They wanted to hear what I was playing for it. I played that Bach concerto slow movement for them. And they asked me if I would come back the next night. And I said, well, my performance is just coming up in a few days and I don't have time to shift to other repertoire. I'm just really going to play the same thing for you. And they said, oh, that's okay. We want to hear it. And we bonded even more deeply the next night. I knew that second night that I would never see these people again, but they had changed me forever.
Yeah.
And I knew that that I needed to do something to bring this music to people that wouldn't have access to it, and to do so regularly. And I instantly knew that it wasn't about violin concertos. It wasn't about solo repertoire. I think this was a catalyst moment where a lot of aspects of my life came together, because I had such powerful experiences at chamber music parties where people come together and make music so much more powerfully in that moment in a reading context than they might if they're hired to play it in a series. Mm-hmm. And there was something about that electricity that I wanted to capture and bring to Music Kitchen. So I thought on that and thought of the name Music Kitchen. I raised some modest seed capital from some committed donors who really saw the vision with me from the very beginning. And about 9 months later, started the first concert, Music Kitchen, Food for the Soul. Mm-hmm. We went back to the place that I was most comfortable, the place that I was most familiar with, which is the church shelter. And by the time 9 months had gone by, I was kind of fraught with worry, thinking, what if that was just a fluke? I happened upon the world's greatest classical music fans who happened to find themselves in shelter that day. And what if this doesn't really work? And I was terribly worried about it, but it worked. And then I thought, and it did again. And then another time. And I thought, well, we should go expanding to other kinds of shelters, full-time shelters. We definitely want to reach women as well. This was a men's shelter program at the church. And so I reached out to the city agency. At the time, I think they thought I was a little kooky for this idea. It was a bit of a tough sell, and I was transferred around to lots of different people. But eventually they helped facilitate venue, and it kind of went on from there. And at this point, we've presented, I think, over 125 concerts, over 200 top artists, including people like Emmanuel Axe, who was a champion of Music Kitchen from nearly the very beginning, just the very second year. Mm-hmm. As soon as he found out about it, he was committed, 2006. And we've reached an estimated 30,000 shelter clients. Wow. Across the United States, and one shelter in Paris, France.
Wow. Well, I'm so impressed. I really admire that you have leveraged this personal passion for music and into this core commitment to and belief in the transformative power of music for anyone. And that you've really sort of made this a practical application. And I'm going to guess, Emmanuel Axe aside, I'm going to guess that initially you were sort of calling in favors from musician friends or whatever, and that it probably only took one time, just like with you, where they suddenly went, whoa, this is powerful. Yeah. This is something amazing.
Well, actually, that was another one of my worries in the beginning. Okay, I have decided to do this thing. Right. But what if the colleagues that I'm inviting are not comfortable doing it? Mm-hmm. It was entirely new territory, and it wasn't really favors. It was, except that it was a modest honorarium. Mm-hmm. And the people who agreed to do it were people who had been dying for an outlet to give back to the community, to use what we have, which is our art form, to give back to the community, and hadn't really found enough ways to do that. And so they were really, really eager to do it. And I was so inspired by their commitment to it. Yeah. It was really just a growing and learning and fulfilling experience around, in a way that I hadn't, across the board, in a way that I hadn't really anticipated. Yeah. So yes, the artists that perform for Music Kitchen, it's not really a volunteer basis. First of all, I believe that honoring artists with even a modest honorarium is important, mm-hmm. because it says it speaks not only to the respect of the artist, but it also speaks to the respect of the community that we're playing for. Mm-hmm. But I also don't, it's not a free-for-all volunteer kind of thing. I curate the level of artistry very carefully. And as I see how many great artists are interested in performing for Music Kitchen, I'm very eager to curate that to the best level that I can, and not just all the people who get the notes right, but people who really have something to say and really exhibit great artistry in addition to instrumentalism.
Yeah. And while it's certainly wonderful and gratifying to play for people who already appreciate and know the classical music tradition and appreciate some of the customs and the rituals and the environments, it really is a whole new level and type of kind of feedback and interaction and gratification to get from an audience like this that has been, I hate to use the word, but starved for that kind of nourishment.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, the thing that I've learned, as I mentioned, there are so many preconceived notions that have fallen away in my doing this work. I'm no expert, but I've learned from the environment and led, of course, from the knowledge of that over time. But the thing that has shocked me, or the preconceived notion that I let go of a long time ago, was that it was only neophytes in the shelter. Right. It isn't so. It isn't necessarily so. Mm-hmm. There are people who have, as you mentioned, are of course starved in their current circumstances of the ability to appreciate this art. But there are people who, of course, have never experienced any aspect of beauty in their lives. Mm-hmm. And there are others who are former major donors of the art form in major venues. Right. That has blown my mind. I remember telling a drop-in center audience, teasing in advance, because we don't generally get a lot of repeat contact with shelter clients. It's usually very transient. But occasionally, if you present concerts in close proximity to each other, and you can find some of the same people. So I was teasing out the appearance of my friend, the Albrecht Meyer, the principal oboist of the Berlin Philharmonic, who was going to come in and play at the shelter. And when I mentioned the Berlin Philharmonic, there's a woman who told me that she was a donor to Carnegie Hall, or that she was a former subscriber to Carnegie Hall, that her mother was a donor to Carnegie Hall. And she says, "Oh, the Berlin Philharmonic. I love the Berlin. Did you know Von Karajan?" Oh, of course you didn't know Von Karajan. You're too young. And then Claudio Abbado, and she mentioned just on the spot some 30 years of conducting history of one of the world's greatest orchestras. Mm-hmm. And it sort of taught me early on that there is no prerequisite for homelessness, and there are a lot of personal circumstances that can lead to temporary experiences of homelessness, or even long-term experiences of homelessness, and they're all very different. Mm-hmm. And there are tragic circumstances that can lead to this experience of a time. Yeah. So it's an honor to be able to bring music to people where they are. Yeah. At this moment in life. And it's actually very exciting. I just wanted to mention that we celebrated our 15th anniversary with a very special project called Forgotten Voices. Oh. I wanted to feature, I've been soliciting and asking for the shelter clients for their prose feedback, comments over the entire history of Music Kitchen. And the purpose of that was really for me to know how the music affected them, and also to share with our donors and potential supporters that, hey, there are actually people listening, and this is what they say. They say the most amazing and profound things about what they're hearing. But as we were approaching the 15th anniversary, I had this radical idea that I wanted to choose to invite 15 award-winning composers, one for every one of Music Kitchen's 15 years, choose among that feedback and set it to a song in a composite song cycle called Forgotten Voices. So we did that, and starting in 2019, January, we premiered one new song every month in a shelter in New York City. Wow. And of course, we ran right into the pandemic, but we premiered 14 songs live on site, and the 15th song we premiered virtually on Zoom. And early in that process, I talked with Carnegie Hall about my desire to have a grand premiere of the entire song cycle, and they loved the idea. Of course, I wanted to do it at what I call the People's House, Carnegie Hall. and they loved the idea and became a partner in the project.
Wow.
So we presented, of course, it was supposed to be at the end of that rollout of the shelter premieres in 2020, but we did present the world premiere of Forgotten Voices at Carnegie Hall and Kelly Hall, sold out concert on March 31st, 2022. Wow. So it's an ongoing project, very special project. We released the album this past March, and we've now begun the touring phase of this song cycle. And we have a really exciting concert for that coming up actually in Lucerne, Switzerland next summer at the Lucerne Festival.
Wow. Well, you have so much going on, and you are so passionate about every single one of those things. I almost don't dare ask you this next question, but is there anything else that you're passionate about right now in this moment, musical or otherwise? Like, what are the things that you think about and that you know, what's on your bucket list, I guess, is the way to say it.
Oh, I am always passionate about doing more interesting things, creative things. And I'm super excited about, two projects. One is ongoing and one is just beginning. I am the first person to play the Wynton Marsalis violin concerto after the original dedicatee, his wife, Nikki Benedetti. Mm-hmm. And I'm really excited that I've played that now. I fell in love with the piece as soon as I heard it. The first time I was asked to play it, I didn't actually know of its existence. And I've played it some 7 times, and I have another 7 engagements of that work coming up this season, including another opening night for the California Symphony. And I'm also really excited about a new project with composer, 5-time Emmy-winning film, TV, and classical composer Jeff Beal, who has written a violin concerto for me specifically. And we are just thoroughly enjoying collaborating together on that project. And since I really had wanted to work with Leonard Slatkin, Leonard and I had been talking about working together. And as it turns out, Jeff also knows Leonard. He's become part of the project, and we will be giving the premiere of this new violin concerto by Jeff Beal called Body in Motion. We're doing the premiere of that with the St. Louis Symphony in January. And we'll be recording it also with Leonard in Europe, doing the European premiere in Spain in the following, or actually just in April, this coming April. So I'm really excited about that project. And Jeff and I have been working together on the piece, and because other projects of ours are coming up and ongoing, I also had the privilege of working with him on his latest film score. It's a British period drama coming up soon called Can You Hear Me? And I recorded violin solos for that. So it's a really exciting new avenue. And yes, you're absolutely right. I'm passionate about everything that I'm doing, and in even, that which is yet undiscovered in my horizon. On my horizon. So
that energy just radiates from you. It's really delightful. I have been speaking on Zoom with award-winning violinist and passionate entrepreneur Kelly Hall-Tompkins about her career as a soloist and chamber musician, and as the founder and director of Music Kitchen, Food for the Soul. Thank you so much. All the best to you. I cannot wait to hear you play in person.
Thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure speaking with you today.